Coming up on today's Locked On Dodgers, a little insight into my background and a few stories from along the way of Dodgers from behind the scenes. That's what's on tap, so make sure to keep it Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, Dodger fans. Welcome to Locked On Dodgers. I'm Vince Samperio, Chavez Ravine Fiends, and I'll be rolling a solo dolo today as, Jeff and I give each other some days off here in this off season. And today I wanted to talk about a little bit of insight into my background for those of you new listeners that we have, and then just kind of a couple of stories that I have that I can actually tell from around my years around the Dodgers in different capacities and different things. Just a couple of stories, nothing too crazy or anything like that, just a couple of funny anecdotes. So that's what we're going to get into, but just want to thank you and remind you to make Locked On Dodgers your first listen every single morning. We are free and available on all platforms and on YouTube, so please check us out. No Dodger news, lockout still going on. And yeah, I don't expect there to be much news in terms of lockout stuff until the new year. I would imagine that everyone wants to enjoy the holidays as much as they can, and I don't think we'll get too much negotiation. So we're gonna have to just wait on to see if they're gonna strike a deal before the season gets started, which I would imagine so. But yeah, I know we have a lot of listeners. I know that we've gained some listeners, Jeff and I, in the past when we kind of give our insight and background and kind of how we got to this point or how to get to that point, I guess, if you're looking to get into, this type of industry, sports industry. And yeah, for me, it's been a journey at this point now to where I'm at now in terms of my career. But, the Dodgers have always been a part of that since the beginning. And then, I've never actually worked for the Dodgers organization, but I've done Dodger related things, baseball related things, and obviously living in Los Angeles most of that time, been able to get some access to Dodger Stadium, to events, to things like that. And, I feel like people like hearing those stories. While I don't have anything that's going to, break the news or break any ground, there's a couple things that behind the scenes that maybe people may never get to experience, and maybe I can bring you, a story that you might like. So just real quick, on myself, I'm currently obviously host of Locked On Dodgers and a social media strategist for Bleacher Report Walk Off, which is their baseball brand. And people always ask, how'd you get there? Whatever, I went to school for journalism. This was back I graduated high school in 2009. So this was back, I didn't actually start journalism until about 2011 though, because my first major is going to be graphic design and just wasn't the right path for me. Went into sports journalism and it all worked out from there. My original goal was to be a sports writer, and then social media kind of took off around the same time. And I'm essentially a sports writer to a certain extent, except, my captions and tweets, you're usually under 280 characters. So it's just a little bit different way of conveying information, but essentially the same job in a sense. And where I got my start was internship with Dodgers Nation, Lakers Nation. And at that point, they had a Raiders website, which was perfect for me because those were my three favorite teams. The Dodgers Nation was just really getting kicked off the ground and really getting some momentum. They needed more help, so I was able to help on that side as a writing intern, which then developed into me becoming a staff writer, which then developed into me taking over and becoming associate editor and social media manager, along with Matt Moreno, who is now with Dodger Blue. And yeah, that's really where this got started. And a lot of teams hadn't really given access to online publications, and I think the Dodgers were for sure one of the first teams to give that type of access to online publications. They saw the reach that some of these websites get. They saw the reach that some of these, social media and brands were getting. And, I think it's smart on them to allow them access as long as they have space and as long as everyone's handling things properly. So the first year I was in charge was 2014, and we got minimal access mainly to like the side events or the events where you see players giving back to the community, and that's where we were able to gain some access. And from there, with that work in 2015, we were able to get a little bit more access. We got to go to spring training, which is where I met Jeff and how this podcast all got started. And then in 2015, we were pretty much credentialed almost every home game that year, whether it was either Matt or I attending the games. And I've talked about kind of what the day consists when you're a credentialed media for a Dodger game, but just a real quick run through. The stadium opens for a 7 o'clock game. The stadium opens around 2 for media. You can get in if you have a spot in the press box. You can sit down, set your stuff down, and then this was before COVID, so this was normal times. Around 3, the locker room would open, and you could go in there, and it was hit or miss which players were there, which players weren't, but you were, if you needed some kind of question answered or anything like that, and the player was there, you could ask. Sometimes, guys are playing different games in there, or sometimes the guys are just hanging out. So that's where you can kind of get some access there or get some of those questions without the big scrum. With if you just need a one-on-one with somebody real quick, and then usually at that point it was automatic. The manager talks around 4 o'clock, and this is usually when we get kind of updates from the lineup or whatever's going on that day, or who's available to pitch, who's not available to pitch, and then go from there. And then Dodgers are taking batting practice around 4:30 ish. You can grab some videos and stuff there, or whatever you need. Then after that, you're just kind of hanging out till the game starts, because the other team's taking batting practice. There's not much going on. There's not too much access to players anymore as they're getting ready for the game. So then 7 o'clock game goes on. And then after the game, you would meet in the press room to ask questions, or outside the locker room, because it's usually the starting pitcher from the game. It's usually Dave, or the manager, which is now Dave Roberts, and then it's usually 1 or 2 players that contributed in that game. And then those interviews are usually conducted in the locker room or in the press room. Back then it was a mixture, and I know probably now with moving forward with some of these COVID protocols, it might remain in the press room or on Zoom. But back then it was, basically wherever they found space, and then we're able to get these guys wrangled up. And then for us as an online publication, we didn't have any deadlines really. We could post whenever we wanted, so we were able to get a little bit more access that way, because we didn't have to go back and write a game story on a deadline. We could hang around. Maybe I'll get into a story of one player trying to freeze the media out, so he wouldn't have to answer questions, and then not realizing that the online media doesn't have deadlines, and he couldn't freeze us out that time. So actually that's the first story I'm going to tell. But first, let's talk about Fantrax. Dodger fans, it's been an interesting offseason, and it won't be long before pitchers and catchers report, we hope. I'm going to give you the inside track on the absolute best fantasy baseball platform in the industry, and it's called Fantrax. Fantrax is the most customizable MLB fantasy platform in the industry, offering the greatest fantasy experience for your dynasty, keeper, redraft, and best ball leagues. Create or join a fantasy baseball commissioner league. Invite your friends and dominate your draft this season. And if you're coming from another service, Fantrax can import any of your current leagues and customize if needed. And guess what? Right now, they're giving you a chance to win an official MLB signed Fernando Tatis Jr. baseball. Yes, that's a baseball signed by Fernando Tatis Jr. All you have to do is go to fantrax.com/locked-on and use the promo code Tatis when you sign up to be eligible to win. Fantasy sports doesn't sleep, and neither does Fantrax, with seasons running 365 days a year. Sign up today to win an official Fernando Tatis signed baseball, and go to fantrax.com/locked-on and use the promo code Tatis. Fantrax, the home of fantasy sports. Play ball. let's paint a situation for you. You got a device that lets you catch the game live, another one where you're streaming your favorite shows, and then another one where you're watching sports highlights, and then maybe you got your neighbor's best friends log in for the good stuff. Well, now there's a simple way to get all that entertainment you love in one space, and that's called DirecTV Stream. Finally, a great way to get your TV together, no hassle. DirecTV Stream brings your live TV and on demand favorites together like never before, so you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. No more juggling remotes, no need to buy another device. It's all right there in one spot, and there's no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. To learn more about DirecTV Stream, go to directv.com. That's directv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package. Okay, so we're back, and I teased a story I would tell. First story I'm going to tell today, and this one involves Jock Peterson back in 2015. Now, Jock Peterson is has become more of an eccentric character here in the last few years, and it's interesting because as eccentric as he's kind of become, he still hasn't been the best interview. I don't think he's a big fan of the media in general, not because they've like done him wrong. I just think he's not as comfortable in that setting. But from what we've seen, he's done the Players Tribune articles before where he really, puts out emotions and thoughts and feelings. And then we saw, he's one of the more animated ones in the dugout. And then as we saw this year with the Braves, he had the a lot going on and the pearls and everything else. And, he was an eccentric personality. But back in 2015, young Jock Peterson wasn't trying to answer questions, even though he would contribute to Dodgers wins. And usually when you contribute to Dodgers wins, you're expected to answer some questions after. And whether you agree that those questions are valid or not, or tell me what you saw on this pitch is really the best way to get any insight. That's just kind of the duty, the nature of the beast when you're a player in the big leagues. So there's one game I'm pretty sure he hit a home run, obviously, because he contributed to the win of the game. We wanted to ask him some questions. Like I mentioned, depending how long the game goes, some of the more traditional media can't stay too long in the locker room to wait for players because they have to go write a game story and get it in before deadline to make sure it's in the paper the next morning. And for the most part, when it goes beyond the manager and the starting pitcher of that game, you're not always going to get access to somebody that maybe had a big moment in the game. Usually the Dodgers PR staff will do a pretty good job of getting whoever's integral to the story of the game to speak, but sometimes they maybe have, a guy that's a little bit lesser integral to the story that they don't necessarily have to go get. And then that player, it's, at that time, you don't know what they're doing because you're allowed in the locker room as a media, but you're not allowed into where they get food or, obviously the showers and workouts and the training room and everything else. So if they're not in the locker room, they could be anywhere. So there was one time it was, people wanted to talk to Jock Peterson. He hadn't come out yet. A lot of the traditional media had left. At that point, it was me, Eric Steven of True Blue LA, and I think Ron from Think Blue. We're all there, and maybe one other person. But Jock comes out, and you can just see the shock on his face that there's still media there. And he said, "Oh, you guys are still here." And we said, "Yeah, we had a few questions." And he said, "Okay, hold on." And it ended up not even being worth it because he didn't give too much insight into any of the answers that he gave. But it was just the look on his face was funny, coming out like, "Oh, you guys are still here. I thought I froze you guys out. I thought I waited everybody out." But he didn't realize that there's non-traditional media now and online publications, and we don't have deadlines, so we can basically wait as long as they allow us to wait. So, yeah, that was funny. Jock was an interesting character. Like I said, he's not the greatest interview, but he has shown his personality. He has kind of shaped his own narrative. And we know the story of Jock Peterson through himself. He told us, why they ended up leaving the Dodgers. Why he wanted to go out on his own and try to be a full-time player. And obviously we saw the pearls and the we are those MFers and everything else this year. And yeah, it's just everyone handles media differently. And Jock was definitely one that wasn't in love with answering questions, but at the end of the day, like I said, it's part of the job, and that's just how it goes. I guess the other part I will say, so most of my stories or most of my insight comes from the 2015 season. That's when I was there almost every game. And I'll throw it back to the beginning. Next story, throw it back to the beginning of the 2015 season. The Dodgers had just signed Zach Greinke, and first fan fest, and he comes out, and this was my first. I think my first main event being covered where there's going to be players there and we get to ask them questions, and it's fan fest, so you're going to get a good amount of players there and you're going to be able to talk to most of them and get some stuff. Or actually, that wasn't Greinke's first year, Greinke's second year, but my first year. So Zach Greinke comes out, and the media scrum kind of starts up, and he's looking around, and most of the normal people at that time were there. Bill Plunkett from the OC Register, and you had JP Hornstra, and at that time it was Mark Saxon and Ken Gurnick were around. So he notices everybody else, and he looks at me directly, and he says, "Oh, there's a new guy." And then, and as if you don't know the story on Greinke, he's dealt with anxiety before. He's a little quirky, I guess maybe would be the word to use when he's on camera or being asked questions, which some of it, we enjoy some of Greinke's because he's so honest and so, forthcoming and tells it how it is. So, but he's looking at me and he's like, "Oh, there's a new guy." And me, I don't know how to react to that. I don't know if, I probably should have just introduced myself at that point, but I didn't. And then he looks around and then he's like, "Okay, I'm ready to go." And he starts answering questions. And for me, I was shook. This was back in 2015. So, 6 years ago, I'm 24 at that point. I'm not 100 or maybe, yeah, I'm not 100% comfortable in that situation yet. I'm still figuring things out. And it was just funny because I didn't know what to do or how to react or how to feel. But it was him, knowing his situation, he looks around and he says, "Oh, there's a new face here," and he wanted to point it out to, at least probably to him. So he was probably talking to himself, but he said it out loud. And from there, obviously, he would see me more often and became more comfortable. And if I had to ask him a question or whatever the case was, he was available to do so. Or at least he didn't say, "Hey, there's a new guy here." So. I'll have, let's see, one or two more stories for you. But first, let's talk about Stance. Stance items, mainly Stance socks. That's how I know Stance. They're colorful, comfortable, everything you could want about a sock. Stance has it. They're very well made, super soft, very unique. They have it's not just Dodgers. They have a lot of different things you can buy. They have, Wu-Tang Clan collaboration, Batman, The Goonies, Star Wars, The Office, Harry Potter, Disney, Marvel, MLB, NBA, Pixar. They got almost anything you could want in a sock. I'm telling you guys, these socks are very comfortable. And I know that they're starting to get into the apparel. They have active apparel. It's holidays. Get some comfortable clothes for somebody in your life. Get some nice looking socks for somebody in your life. Go find some Dodger socks. That's a great stocking stuffer. That's all you got to do. Stance is great. And they were founded in 2009, and Stance is a radical reinvention of socks, underwear, and active apparel. You may know, like I said, you may know them for socks, but they do have other things, and it's time to check it out. So right now, go to stance.com and use the promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for 15% off your order. Stance believes that the perfect fit matters more than fitting in, and that those who feel good do good. Go see for yourself right now. Get an account at stance.com. Get 15% off your first purchase with the promo code Locked On. Enjoy the color and comfort of a life less ordinary with Stance. All right, let's finish up here with a couple more little stories here. This one, I won't say which year it was. I won't say what player it was because it doesn't paint. I'm not saying it doesn't. Well, doesn't paint the best picture of the player, but it also kind of points to a reality of kind of what the players have to deal with and how things go. They have different things in contract, and it's not just playing baseball. There's, like I said, answering questions from media. There's a sometimes in their contract they have, you have to attend a certain amount of promotional events or a certain amount of events in regards to the organization. And that's kind of where this story stems from. So there was a player talking to one of the Dodgers PR people, and the Dodgers had just played like 21 games in 21 days or something like that. And they had a day off. And the PR person was telling this player, hey, there's an event tomorrow here at the stadium for fans. I don't remember what the event was, but we need you. You got to be here. And the player was like, not happy about it. Didn't wanted to have that day off. Rightfully so. He had just played 21 games in 21 days, and the PR guy's like, you know what? This is one of the ones in your contract. I'm sorry, but you're gonna have to show up. And the player was just like, well, are you gonna be there? To the PR guy, and the PR guy was like, no, I'm not gonna be there. He's like, oh, so you get a day off, but I don't. And it was just for me, it was a funny interaction because like I completely understand where the player's coming from. Like that sucks. Like you just worked 21 days in a row. You finally have a day off. You probably don't want to do anything that whole day or hang out with your family or whatever the case is. And now he's got to come back to the stadium, back to work, and talk to the fans. And obviously, he's not going to take it out on the fans. It's not their fault. So I would imagine he came to the event the next day and was a very charming version of himself. But it just goes, if you ever run into a player and maybe the interaction doesn't go as great as you want, just different variables to take into account. Like, hey, maybe he just had 21 games in a row and, isn't necessarily the most lively person at the moment. I'm not going to say that excuses some people, players, celebrities from some things that do happen, but there are other variables that factor into some of these things, and that was one of them. And it was just funny to see a player that mad, especially had like the PR guy like, oh, you get a day off, but I don't. Like that line was pretty funny to me. And yeah, that's just how it goes sometimes. Like I said, these guys have things in their contracts of what events they have to go to or whatever the case is. They're always having the season ticket holder events or whatever it was. But yeah, I just thought that was funny to me. And let's finish up with one more. This one is also from 2015 spring training. And this was when the Dodgers had just kind of overhauled their food program. That's when Gabe Kapler was around, and the food program was going to organic food. And I guess that the menu that they had at Camelback Ranch had changed. So Carl Crawford was talking to some of the guys around the cage when they're doing batting practice, and he's talking about the food and directing it towards one of the coaches. I forget which coach it was at the time, and saying, hey coach, we got to get this food changed back. I can't handle this. We used to come in, we used to have bacon and sausage and then eggs and everything else. And now depends on the day, it's bacon or sausage. He's like, I need my meals. I need my subsistence. I need to be able to feed myself. He's like, I'm out here with the headache right now because I'm not eating like I normally eat before some of these practices. And then he said, and why is there no ketchup? He's like, ketchup's tomatoes, ain't that organic? And he had everyone cracking up. And then I remember Scott Van Slyke says, hey, if you need some ketchup, I got some in my locker. Just let me know. So these guys, it was a shock to them as well of what they're used to and what they want. I remember Adrian Gonzalez was around at that time, and he mentioned that he got food before he even showed up to Camelback. He said, yeah, I stopped and got a breakfast burrito because I'm not a big fan of how the things change, and I don't want to, I want everything to kind of stay the same. I want my routine to kind of be there, and I want to make sure that I'm eating what I need to eat. And but there was just a back and forth among guys, and that was, like I said, one of the first, well, obviously the first time around spring training in that capacity, in that setting for me. And a lot of people ask me, "Oh, how do you be around all these players and not fanboy out or not get nervous or anything else?" And for me, I've always realized that they're just like us. I mean, I know it's a cliche thing, but they are just like us. They're just way better at baseball than a lot of us are. And at the end of the day, that's really the only difference between us, whether either wallet, money, bank account, and baseball skills. Those are the main differences between us and a lot of these players. And for me, that obviously I had to recognize that, because that it was my job. I'm treating this like my job. They're part of my job. I need to act professionally. But when you hear stuff like that, it's just like they're just like just like us. If you were going somewhere, or if your job fed you and all of a sudden they switched up all the food on you, you would feel a type of way, or you would probably not like it, because a lot of people don't like change, especially if it's change that they don't support. So it would that if anything, if I hadn't already felt like, okay, these guys are just guys, just like I said, way better at baseball than I am, that was kind of that welcome to, I guess, the welcome to moment of, oh, these guys are complaining about bacon and sausage and ketchup right now. Like they're just regular people like us. And I don't know, that part always just makes fun. Just it was one of those, had to be there, because you had to hear like how Carl Crawford has a distinct way of talking. So like the way he's talking, Scott Van's like saying, "Hey, I got some ketchup in my locker if you really need some." Adrian Gonzalez just saying, "You know what? I bypass all that. I get my own food." It was just one of those things where, man, these guys are just worried about what they're eating for breakfast. They're not worried about anything else right now, and it was just funny to me. But yeah, that's where we're gonna close up today. I'll have, maybe we'll do this a couple more times here in this off season, where I can just tell some stories of behind the scenes stuff, whether it's with names or without names, like a couple we had without name today, and a few with names. But just to give you guys some background, and we're getting the access, so want to bring some of that access to you, and show you how things are, and that's how it goes. And if you personally have any questions about how maybe to get into this type of industry, or how to get started, or if you're in college or whatever the case is, you can always reach out to me. I'm on Twitter at Vince Samperio. My DMs are open, and I've helped out a few people in the past, whether it's whatever it is, just answering questions, or I have a pretty decent network too, in terms of sports industry. So I can always help out as much as I can, if I feel that it's worth my time. So that's gonna do it for today's episode. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day, every day, or every weekday morning. So make sure that your first listen is Locked On Dodgers on those weekday mornings. If you're not listening 5 days a week, we'd really appreciate it if you could. I know it's the off season. I know there's not a lot going on, but we are here, and we got a lot going on. So Locked On Dodgers got you covered. We are going to be here every single weekday morning, and we're wherever you get podcasts, or on YouTube if you want to see our face. So that's where you can go to find us. We're your first listen. Make Locked On Bets your second listen of the morning. Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q, with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. It's free and available on all platforms. If you want to find us, Locked On Dodgers, we're on Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Dodgers. Jeff is on Twitter at Snydog. Like I mentioned, I'm at Vince Samperio. DMs are open on all those accounts for any questions, comments, or concerns. You can always send those also via email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or via voicemail/text at 323-863-LOCK. That's 5625. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be with us when you get in your car, or if you're at home. Search My Advice Play podcast, Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.